December 17th, 1983. Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, Psychiatric Evaluation Room 4. Al Pacino sits motionless in a white hospital chair, staring at Dr. Martha Klein like she's speaking a foreign language. She's just asked him the simplest question in the world. What's your name? For the third day straight, he can't answer. The words Al Pacino feel like lies in his mouth. Because for 72 hours, he's been trapped inside Tony Montana's head, and the real Al Pacino is nowhere to be found. Los Angeles, December 15th, 1983. 3 months after Scarface wrapped filming, Al Pacino hasn't spoken his own name in public for 18 days. When forced to introduce himself, he either stays silent or answers Tony in a Cuban accent that won't disappear from his vocal cords. The crisis began during the film's final week of production at Universal Studios. Method acting had always been Pacino's greatest strength and most dangerous obsession. For Scarface, he'd immersed himself completely in Tony Montana's psychological world. Cuban accent maintained 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Cocaine-snorting gestures performed without actual drugs. Paranoid thought patterns that infected his real-world interactions. Violence simmering beneath every conversation. But when director Brian De Palma called "That's a wrap" on the final scene, something unprecedented happened in cinema history. The character didn't leave the actor's body. Lote would answer his hotel room phone as Tony, recalls assistant director Jerry Kramer with obvious distress. He'd order room service using the accent, and Tony's aggressive mannerisms. He'd sign autographs. T. Montana in Tony's distinctive handwriting. We initially thought he was staying in character for publicity purposes. Nobody realized he was psychologically trapped inside a fictional identity. The first serious warning sign came at the official wrap party on December 10th at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Producer Martin Bregman approached Pacino to congratulate him on what everyone knew was a career-defining performance. "Amazing work, Al," Bregman said, extending his hand in friendship. Pacino stared at him with genuine confusion, his eyes showing no recognition. "Who the fuck is Al?" he responded in Tony's thick Cuban accent. "You talking to me, man? My name's Tony Montana. Antonio Montana from Cuba." Bregman laughed nervously, assuming it was an elaborate joke or publicity stunt. But Pacino's eyes showed no trace of humor or self-awareness. For the next 3 hours, he introduced himself to every party guest, industry veterans who'd known him for decades, as Tony Montana, recent immigrant from Cuba. He spoke in vivid detail about his childhood in Havana. He asked studio executives about potential cocaine connections in Los Angeles. He wasn't performing anymore. He genuinely believed every word. Co-star Michelle Pfeiffer later described the evening as deeply unsettling. She said, "All looked right through me like we'd never met. When I mentioned scenes we'd filmed together, he talked about me like I was some woman Tony had encountered in Miami. It was like all had been erased completely." The psychological breaking point came 48 hours later, during what should have been a routine family dinner. Pacino's 13-year-old daughter, Julie, ran to embrace her father when he arrived at his ex-wife's Beverly Hills home for their scheduled visit. "Daddy," she called out, with genuine excitement and love. Pacino stepped backward, visibly confused and slightly threatened. "Listen, little girl," he said in Tony's distinctive accent and aggressive tone. "I think you got the wrong fucking guy here. My name's Antonio Montana. I don't know who your father is, but it ain't me." Julie burst into tears, unable to understand why her father was speaking to her like a stranger using a fake accent. Pacino's ex-wife, Jill Clayburgh, initially thought it was some kind of cruel joke when she realized he was serious, that he genuinely didn't recognize his own daughter, she called 911 in panic. The paramedics found him in the kitchen at 8:47 p.m., obsessively reorganizing spice racks while muttering detailed plans about moving product through the port and dealing with those fucking Colombians. When EMTs tried to escort him peacefully to the ambulance, he grabbed a butter knife from the counter and screamed Tony Montana's famous line, "Say hello to my little friend," before collapsing from complete physical and psychological exhaustion. At Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, the psychiatric emergency team faced an unprecedented case in entertainment industry psychology. Dr. Martha Klein, who'd previously treated actors for various performance-related disorders, had never encountered such complete identity dissolution in her 20-year career. Ole couldn't access any memories that weren't part of Tony's fictional backstory, she explains. Ask him about his childhood in the Bronx. He'd tell elaborate stories about growing up in Cuba. Ask about his film career. He'd describe drug deals and murders that never happened. The Al Pacino personality was completely inaccessible, like it had been surgically removed from his brain. The mandatory 72-hour psychiatric evaluation began with basic cognitive and identity assessment tests. Hour 1, what's your full name? Complete silence. Hour 3, what's your name? Hostile stare. No verbal response. Hour 6, what's your name? Antonio Montana. Hour 8, where were you born? Havana, Cuba, 1940. Hour 12, what's your name? Extended silence, then uncontrollable crying. Hour 16, what's your name? I don't, there's someone else. That fragmented response at hour 16 marked the first microscopic crack in Tony Montana's psychological armor. For approximately 30 seconds, Pacino seemed to surface from the character's depths, confused, terrified, and completely disoriented. Then Tony's personality snapped back aggressively, more defensive than before, as if protecting himself from some external invasion. Dr. Klein attempted multiple established therapeutic approaches. Hypnosis failed completely. Tony's personality actively resisted any attempt to access deeper consciousness levels. Medication was considered too risky. They had no framework for understanding which personality would respond to psychiatric drugs. The only viable option was painstaking psychological excavation, slowly digging through layers of fictional identity to locate Al Pacino buried underneath. Hour 24. The first significant therapeutic breakthrough arrived unexpectedly. Tell me about acting, Dr. Klein said during a routine questioning session. Pacino looked genuinely confused by the question. Acting? What the fuck is acting? But then something subtle flickered behind his eyes. Wait, there was this guy before I came to Miami. He used to pretend to be different people for money. The recovered memories came in small, fragmented pieces. Al Pacino existed in Tony Montana's distorted mental framework as a vague other person who'd somehow possessed Tony's physical body temporarily, like a confused ghost haunting his own psychological territory, uncertain of his right to exist. Hour 36. The internal psychological battle intensified dramatically. Pacino began switching mid-sentence between competing personalities, often multiple times within single conversations. My name is Alfred James Pack. No, fuck that shit. Tony Montana, you fucking cockroach. From Cuba, he'd conduct full arguments with himself using distinctly different voices. Tony's Cuban accent aggressively fighting Al's natural Bronx inflection. Nursing staff recorded him having elaborate conversations between the two identities, sometimes lasting hours. The most psychologically disturbing incident occurred during hour 42. Dr. Klein asked him to examine himself in a full-length mirror and describe exactly what he observed. Pacino stared at his reflection for over 10 minutes without speaking or moving. "That's not me," he finally whispered with genuine terror. "That face, it's all wrong. Too old. Tony's supposed to be younger. This is some old man wearing Tony's face like a fucking mask." He punched the mirror with his bare fist, cutting his knuckles and requiring medical attention. Hour 48. Severe physical symptoms emerged, despite no actual drug use. Although Pacino had never used cocaine in his personal life, his body began manifesting authentic withdrawal symptoms: profuse sweating, uncontrollable shaking, paranoid episodes where he accused hospital staff of being undercover DEA agents. His nervous system had so completely adopted Tony Montana's drug user identity that it created genuine addiction responses without any chemical dependency. His brain had convinced itself he was detoxing from heavy cocaine use. Dr. Klein documented, "The psychological imitation was so physiologically complete, it became medically real. We had to treat cocaine withdrawal symptoms in a man who'd never touched the drug." Hour 52. Pacino's condition deteriorated further as both personalities began fragmenting. He started speaking in rapid-fire Spanish, a language he'd learned phonetically for the role but never actually understood. He'd hold conversations with invisible Colombian drug dealers, negotiating complex business arrangements that existed only in his fractured psyche. Hospital security had to intervene when he tried to escape to warn Tony's mother about incoming assassination attempts. Hour 60. Dr. Klein implemented an experimental intervention that changed everything. She brought in footage from Pacino's previous film performances, hoping to trigger recognition of his actual identity. When scenes from Serpico appeared on the television screen, Pacino stopped speaking entirely. For 20 continuous minutes, he watched his own performances in complete, stunned silence. Tears streamed down his face without explanation. "That man," he whispered, pointing at the screen with a shaking finger. "I remember him. He was real." Hour 65. Identity reconstruction began through cinematic archaeology. Using his complete filmography as psychological anchors, Dr. Klein slowly helped Pacino rebuild his fractured sense of authentic self. Each previous role became a stepping stone back to his core identity. Michael Corleone's controlled intensity, Frank Serpico's moral complexity, Bobby Deerfield's vulnerability. Like reverse method acting, he performed being Al Pacino until the performance gradually became psychological reality again. Hour 68. The critical psychological battle for identity control. Tony Montana made his final desperate attempt to maintain dominance. "That actor guy is trying to steal my life," Pacino screamed. "He wants to erase me and take my place. But I'm real. I'm Tony Montana. I have memories. I have a life. He's just pretending." The two personalities fought for control so violently that Pacino had to be physically restrained. Hour 70. Al Pacino began emerging consistently for longer periods. "I remember," he said quietly during a lucid moment. "I remember being someone else before Tony. I had a career. I had a daughter. Oh God, what did I say to Julie?" The guilt and shame of not recognizing his own child began the final process of psychological healing. Hour 72. The definitive breakthrough that saved Al Pacino's sanity. "What's your name?" Dr. Klein asked for the final time. Pacino looked directly into her eyes, his natural voice finally returning completely. "Alfred James Pacino." "Al Pacino, that's who I am." The Cuban accent was gone permanently. Tony Montana's psychological grip had finally been broken, but the traumatic experience left permanent psychological scars that affected the rest of his career. Pacino never again used complete method immersion techniques. He developed strict protocols for maintaining separation between character and self-identity. Daily identity confirmation exercises became part of his routine. Regular preventive therapy sessions were scheduled. Emergency contacts were established who could wake him up if he ventured too deeply into character territory. His relationship with his daughter required months of repair. "Daddy had to go away for a while," he explained to Julie, "but I'm back now and I'll never leave you again like that." The incident remained Hollywood's best-kept secret for over 2 decades. Studio publicity departments blamed his hospital stay on exhaustion from intensive filming. Only Dr. Klein's sealed medical records documented what really happened during those 72 hours, when one of America's greatest actors forgot his own name and nearly lost his mind to a fictional character. The experience fundamentally altered Pacino's entire approach to his craft. "I learned that some characters are too psychologically dangerous to allow inside completely," he later admitted in private therapy sessions. Tony Montana almost murdered Al Pacino, not physically, but psychologically. "For 72 hours, I simply didn't exist as myself." Method acting instructors worldwide now use Pacino's case as the primary cautionary example about the severe dangers of complete identity immersion. The man who'd mastered the art of becoming anyone had to learn the most difficult and essential role of his lifetime, remembering how to be himself. Today, the 72 hours Al Pacino couldn't say his own name remain the darkest, most terrifying period of his entire career, not because he failed as a performer, but because he succeeded too completely, too dangerously. He'd wanted to become Tony Montana so thoroughly that he'd accidentally erased Al Pacino in the process. And even now, 4 decades later, somewhere deep in the buried corners of his unconscious mind, Tony Montana still whispers occasionally in his distinctive accent, patiently waiting for another opportunity to take complete control and never give it back.